What's going on, everybody? So today in this video, what we're going to be going through is building out the invoices and payments integrations into our Airtable CRM. So we're going to have invoices. Some of those are going to have payments attached to them. Others are not going to have payments attached to them. We will also be going in rolling up invoice information to see total number of hours paid for by any customer, total number of invoices sent to them, their most recent pay date. Yeah, that's what we'll be doing. If you haven't met me before, my name is Ben Green. I'm the owner of Optimize.is, and we basically help businesses build out CRMs and different customer management systems just like this in Airtable. So if you're interested in that and you want to book a call to get some help, if you're tired of doing this alone, you can go check out the link in the description and book a call with me or someone on my team. Without further ado, we're going to get into this. We are going to be doing some pretty advanced concepts here in Airtable. So I'm really excited to show you how to do some of this stuff. And we're also going to be connecting this with make.com. So to connect Stripe to Airtable, we'll be using Make. So let's jump right into it. So I have done a little bit of pre-work in here. Basically what I did was I exported a CSV from my old CRM and imported it into this CRM. But I'm going to show you exactly everything that I did. So everything in here, I've started the series a while ago, but we've added a companies table and an invoices table. Each company table is going to have a company name. It'll have some contacts linked to it. Currently, this is one of the reasons I'm building the CRM is I didn't have a companies table. So currently everything's just contacts, which is why you see an email here in the primary field. But every record here in this invoices table is an invoice that was at least created in Stripe, and some of them have payments, some of them do not. So how it previously worked was just every record, every time I create an invoice, Zapier would watch invoices in Stripe and it would add it to my old Airtable base. So you can see some of these, like the status on these are drafts. It says I sent them. I don't think I actually sent them. Actually, I don't think I had something to update them as sent. But this is everything. These are all of the invoices, and yeah. So how it would also work is based on the customer ID. So every customer in Stripe has a customer ID. It would link it to the right contact or company in my old CRM. So we're going to do the same thing here. And later on, I'll be getting into an onboarding automation video. Not in this video, in a different video, where when I onboard a new client, it adds them into Stripe. Actually, it's from the audit call. On the audit call, they get added to Stripe, and I pull their customer ID back into Airtable. So the customer ID is really what runs the whole system, and it's what links all this stuff. So if you don't have this set up already, what I would suggest setting up is having an invoice ID column, which is what this one is, Stripe Invoice ID. The next thing that I would really suggest having, some of this doesn't, as I found out, doesn't really matter. Like this field, we don't really need. The invoice number is fine to have. It's good for reference. Pay date, I would highly suggest having this one. I'm going to add some of these dates next to each other. So the email of the person that it is sent to, we'll use that one. This context field will get deleted because these are the same thing right now. This is a linked record to the companies table. Definitely will need this one. So all these fields are fields you can add. You just need to have these set up so that we can do this effectively. The status, I added a few statuses in here. We have paid, draft, open, and voided. And that's it. Origin. We're going to default this if it's coming from Stripe to create it in Stripe. I have this in here because some clients I don't go through Stripe. For example, request payment via Zelle, or yeah, it just changes for some clients, so not everything is through Stripe. Then we have a sent date. So that's the date that the invoice was sent. We have a due date that comes from the invoice. And then we have a pay date. So the pay date is once the payment is received. We have, in my old CRM, I had Zapier come in and update the date that it was paid, as well as update the fees that were paid. and I think the invoice total didn't get updated, but that's pretty much all you need. Things I also have in here are quantities. So when I write an invoice, how I do it is I write an invoice, say for 10 hours for a certain hourly rate, and it adds it back in here. These ones are for like just test data in here. So like some of them are 1, some of them are 111, but it's a number of hours for a certain price per hour. Then we also have the invoice total and then fees, like I was saying. The rest of these fields are specific for my CRM because I do hourly calculations. I already imported all this data from the old CRM. There are certain invoices that are excluded from our calculations. And then we have the old created date from the old CRM. So those are all the fields that I would suggest adding in here. I added a field for profit as well, and how we can edit this and redo it. So this profit formula says if status equals paid, so this status field is in purple right here. If this field equals paid, in quotes, then what I have it do is I have it sum the invoice total and the fees. So the invoice total down here, in this example, it's $2,500, and the fees taken out for processing this transaction were $72.80. So that puts the profit at the invoice total minus the fees. And then if the status, so if we had this formatted well, it would say like this. So it says if the status is paid, then sum those two things together. If the status is not paid, then return 0. And how you would read this for this if statement is if this logical statement is true, then return the value of true. If it's not, then return the value of false. So this is what we're starting out with. This is the company, or this is the invoices table. We also have a companies table. So here in the company table, this is just some test data in here. These are the different companies. And really the only important thing here is it's linked. It just has a name, which we just have as this email address. And this email address is linked to all those invoices. So that is currently how that is set up. We also have a deal stage, and one thing we need to add in here is that Stripe customer ID. For every customer that's added in Stripe, I'm going to say Stripe. For every customer that's added in Stripe, they will have been added from this Airtable. So this should always be filled in. It's just not because we're just starting this out. So that's what we're starting with. We're starting with the customer ID on the companies table, and then we have all the invoice data here. So now we want to add an automation, which we will first go map out in Miro. That will add invoices in here. Another automation that updates them as sent, and then another automation that updates them as paid. And that's what we'll be doing. Each invoice that's created will also be linked to a company based on the Stripe ID. But let's go map those out real quick. All right, so let's see. Okay, so here are some of our automations. Let me zoom out just a little bit. Okay, so the ones we're going to be going through is this one right here, as well as this one right here. So our first automation is this one in Zapier, it checked every 15 minutes. This is how the automation is set up though. So it watches for new invoices, then it goes and finds or creates a company, and then it creates an invoice and adds a quantity, fills in the invoice total. The other one watches for payments, which I believe in Stripe are called charges. Then it sends a Slack message to say new payment received. And then I had it waiting 15 minutes or 16 minutes in case the invoice wasn't created yet. Like if they pay instantly or I charge their card instantly, it would wait for the invoice to be created, which could at least be 15 minutes. So starting over, it goes new payment, then sends a Slack message, and then it waits for a certain amount of time to make sure the invoice is created. Then it finds the right invoice, and then it updates that invoice as paid. So we're going to set up the same thing in our system, but through Make, not Zapier. So jumping into scenarios and Make, we're going to create a new one. This new scenario is going to say, this is going to start at the beginning. So invoice created, create in optimized CRM. So we're going to add a module here. It is going to be Stripe. If you haven't added Stripe yet, you'll need to do that. And then you can do this part. So you'll just need to go get your API key, and then you can create and Make. So this is going to be our new scenario. It's going to watch events. So it's going to ask for a webhook, and we need to add a new webhook. This is where you'll need to add your Stripe connection if you haven't already. And now we're going to pick a group. So this is going to be invoice created. Now there's a lot of different webhook options in this. So we want to be very specific because we're going to have a few different instances of this. And we'll be testing this out to make sure it works as well. All right. So let's say group is going to be, so we have the option for charge. We don't care about charge yet. We have the option for invoice as well as invoice item. So I believe we will want to choose new invoice. Now we have all of these options. So one option is we could create one that watches all of these things, all of these different events, and does different things based on what event it is. And I think that's actually a fair thing to do. So we're going to say invoice created. We'll choose that one. We didn't yet map out something for if the invoice is deleted, but we could. Invoice finalized, marked as uncollectible, marked as paid, payment action required, payment failed, payment successful, invoice sent. So we're going to choose invoice paid, invoice sent. We will say payment failed. We will say all of these. Invoice upcoming, invoice updated, invoice voided. I don't necessarily care about all of those. And then invoice finalized as well. So let's go and see, let's try this out. So we're going to create this webhook, and these are the ones we're going to go with. We're going to click save, and we'll map out different things to do based on what it triggered off of. I didn't name it very great. I'll probably have to go back and rename that, but we'll use that. Okay, now I'm going to go into Stripe and I'm going to start creating an invoice. So 1 second. All right, so now in Stripe, I got to myself as a customer. I'm going to shrink myself over here. So this is the customer ID that I always use. And the reason why I use this customer ID is because you can write a URL right here that will take you right there. I'll do that in another video, but I'm going to use this customer ID and I'm going to add it to Airtable. And I'll be importing all of my actual customer IDs in. But for this, it's this customer right here. That's going to be the customer ID. Okay, so back here in Stripe, now what I'm going to start doing is I'm going to say action. I'm going to create an invoice. This is the actual process that I do. I've now technically created it, so I want to see, is this webhook going to catch anything? So let me X out of that, and we will delete that. And now that this scenario is, oh, does it say something? Okay, so this actually did say invoice created. That's awesome. Opening this up, it has the right customer ID. It has the right footer, it has everything. Everything looks correct. Okay, so let's redo that. We already deleted that one. So we're gonna have to run this, and here we will actions, create invoice. Okay. So that created one for 2:10, which is the right time for what it is here. And this all should look right. Okay. So that's perfect. So we want to add one thing for if the action was invoice created, which is the event type down here. Okay, so let's add another module, and my good friend Scott Rose taught me most of this, so we're going to try to do this our best. We're going to add a router. Now what this router should do from what he taught me, and sorry Scott if I'm not saying all of this exactly right, but basically it should go from top to bottom and it should route this automation to the right place. How you make sure it goes to the right places is using filters. So if I click on this, I can add more, but basically each one right here will be filtered. So this is going to be invoice created. So when you click on the little filter or the little gear icon, you can put a label on there. So this one is going to be invoice created. Condition will be that one status down here, this type, is equal to invoice created. So if the invoice is created, what I want it to go do is I want it to go into Airtable, and I want it to get a record. It's going to be in the optimized CRM. So what it's going to do here is it's going to go into the companies table. And actually I chose the wrong one. Instead of get record, it should be search. So we'll have it display the name, but it's going to say search based on the let's see. Okay. I don't think I'm going to do get a record. I think that is the wrong one, so I'm going to delete that. And instead I'm going to add in Airtable search records. So instead of get records, I should have read this. It should be search records. And now we're just going to have to add this back in here. So we're going to say the type, the event type is what we just pasted. Okay, so we should search records in the optimized CRM. It's going to search the companies table. We'll have it output the ID, the name, and the Stripe customer ID. We're going to have it search using quotes. It's going to search based on this customer right here. Then we're going to say equals. And then in these curly braces, we're going to type Stripe customer ID. And limit on this, it should just pull one. There should only be one matching. All right, so now, let's see, can I run that on the one that was created? Probably not anymore. So that's what it's going to do, and it should find a record. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go create the invoice record. So this is again going to be in the optimized CRM. And it's going to be in the invoices table. So the Stripe invoice ID, we will pull that from this invoice ID object right there. The invoice number, this is usually, I don't know if there's a way to really see what this says right there, but it would look something like it would not look very super pretty, basically. So maybe it'll just be that for now. The email, we'll pull in the customer email. I usually do this just in case it didn't happen to find a search record, which I know you could add more advanced logic in here, but we're just going to pull in the customer email. the status is going to be the same thing every time. In this time, it's going to be draft, which if I go back into my Airtable base, I want to make sure it has the same language as everywhere else. So the status should say lowercase draft. If I open this back up here, I'm just going to copy that and paste it in there. Companies, this should be mapped in here from my search records right here. And this should be pulling from, I think, this ID. We're going to test that out. Now, some of these things will be pulled straight from Stripe. So this origin, or it'll be pulled straight from this right here. So origin will always be created in Stripe. And now let's open this back up. The rest of this, at this time, I will not be pulling the rest of this in. So let's click OK there, and let's see if we can test this out. So we're going to say, create a new invoice, and we will run this. Okay, so let's see, it followed this. It said, it found the right customer, so it found that record that we added the customer ID on, and then it should have created a new invoice. So let's jump back into Airtable, and let's see if it created it or not. Okay. So I just had to update the filters real quick, and now we can see right here, if I pop this one open, it is going to say I created this via API 46 seconds ago. That looks awesome. Okay, so now I want to go back here. So one of our other actions was the invoice was finalized. So we're going to add in here some items on the invoice, and then I'm going to send it to BenGrade. Okay, so I've added some items to the invoice. I've added, I only ever do one line item on the invoice, unless it's like reconciling a receipt, which doesn't impact hours. So it should only have this one line. It's going to say hourly consulting. There's a quantity of 10, it's $10 each, and soon I'm going to send this. So I saved this, and what I want to know now is, what does Stripe consider that as? Do they consider that as a finalized invoice? If not, what I'll go do in Stripe is I'll review this invoice, and I will send it to me. Okay, so there we had invoice finalized. So now I want to say here, set up a filter for invoice finalized, where something equals this. So that type equals that. So for invoice finalized, what I want to do is I want to go into Airtable. I want to search records this time. If the invoice is finalized, that should mean it was already created. So in the optimized, I should be able to search in the invoices table. Return all of these and use a formula. So our formula here is going to say that the Stripe invoice ID equals this ID right here from the start. So now I'm going to try to use this invoice ID right here. We're going to run that, and it didn't find anything. Okay, so what I did wrong was I did not include quotes around this. And so we're going to click OK there, and we're going to say run that again. Okay, so that found our invoice, I think. No, it did not find our invoice, because that invoice might be a new one, I suppose. So the invoice ID we're looking for is that one. Okay, so the next thing I would go see is maybe when I was pasting that, it may have, when I click run this module only, at the beginning here, when I pasted it, it had a tab in there. So we're gonna retry that and see if now, okay, now it has an output bundle, which is what we want. That means it found the record. Okay, so now we're gonna say update the record. So this is gonna be in the optimized CRM. It's going to update the invoices table. The record it's going to use is going to be from 6, the search record. And what it's going to do is it's going to update the line item names to pull from here. So let's see. Lines. Okay, so we may have to come back in here and do some work with text aggregators, but for now we're just going to see if we can, probably it's not right, but we're going to see if we can just pull in the description right there. From that same area, we're going to pull from Stripe. From the lines, it's going to pull the quantity. It's also going to pull the item prices. So the total amount was $100. Each price was $10. So I can't tell if that's supposed to be 4 or 5. So the unit amount here should be that amount. Invoice total. We'll see if we can pull the total amount due in here. That's worth a shot. And we will see, yeah. We'll also pull in fees, which we don't have at this point. We have to wait until it's paid based on the payment collection method. It may be something else. Subtotal, the rest of this we won't worry about. Okay. Now we can click OK. Now let's try this again. So let's go create a new invoice. All right, so now I've created it and it's been, okay, so what happened this time? So in that, okay, so this is pulling the invoice that was sent from a while ago. So I guess while we're here, let's take this and say invoice sent. So it's no longer a draft at this point. Let's say set up a filter, label as that. This will be the last thing in here. Says invoice sent. In this case, it's going to do this like same thing as this one right here. Then it's going to do this right here as well. So it's going to search for that invoice, and then it's going to update it as sent. Except here, it's going to be from 8. So the status is going to say sent. And we will not include any of this. Okay, so let's get a little bit messy, so let's auto align this. Okay, so which one here? So this invoice finalized, I I believe this one is for the sent, so that appears to be in here wrong. So this should actually be invoice sent instead. All right. Auto align that again. We'll click save. Now let's try this again. Okay. So let's run this again. Use the existing data and see what happened. Okay. So in this case, the invoice was created. So we can see here, it searched, and then it created the record. And that all looks to be right. Is there another one I can use? Okay, so that was this one. So now let's review the invoice. Click send. Okay, so in this case, the invoice was finalized. It went and found the right invoice, and then it updated it. So let's go into Airtable and see what that looks like. Okay, so this says $5,000 draft. So this may just come in a little bit different than it did prior. So the quantity was 5, the item prices is 1,000. So it says invoice total is 5,000. Okay, so this may just be something like after a certain date, I write a formula that says, okay, take the invoice total and divide it by 100 because it's bringing it in as cents. It doesn't have any fees. It's not excluded. So all of this appears to be accurate. Now let's go back into Chrome and let's see if there's anything else we can run. Okay, so that one was for invoice sent, except it says invoice permissions allowed to create the new select option sent. So that sometimes can happen. What you have to do is status. You have to make sure all of your options are in here. So in this case, I want to say sent, and we'll make that yellow. Okay, we'll drag it right next to the open. Okay, so let's go back to Chrome. Let's see if I can use the existing data. Okay, that time I had no problem updating it as sent. Sweet. Now is there anything else? Nope, not right now. Okay, so now our last one is when it gets paid. So I think if I click this, it will say invoice paid. So we'll set up a filter that says invoice dot paid. We'll say based on a condition that is that the event type? We'll say that type is invoice dot paid. Click OK. Now we're going to clone this. I think I need to re-add all that now. We'll delete this. We also clone this. Okay. So this one is going to be, we're going to re-add that filter, invoice.paid, there and there. We're going to say that this type right here is that. So this one we shouldn't have to edit anything. Oh wait, no, this one is the create record. Okay, so let's see. I may have messed that one up a little bit. We're going to delete these. So invoice sent and finalized, those ones are where it updates. So we're going to clone these instead. This one, we're going to set up that filter that says invoice.paid. Say OK. Now we'll auto align these, and we just need to update this right here to say the status should be paid. So this also needs to be updated to reference instead of 8, because 8 will not come before that. Guaranteed it will come from 12, that record ID. So that's why that little yellow thing was right there. We'll click OK. And we'll save this. Okay, so now it appears as if everything is set up right. And we have our filters set up correctly. So now I'm going to go ahead and pay that invoice. Actually, before I do that, the other thing I want to update here is when it is paid. I suppose we're just going to have to see what the information is first. Okay, so I just paid it, and we can click run, use the existing data. Okay, so now it ran, it updated everything is paid. So the last thing for us to do in here is to come down here to fees, and we will pull in the fees. So let's just try typing in here, search for fees. Nope. All right, let's see if we can dig into this and find out what the fees were. So if we scroll down, and I'm not seeing it in this output. Okay, well, I guess we just won't pull it in on this one. I would like to pull it in, so this is a little bit frustrating. Can't find it. We may have to like update the invoice or wait for a different thing to come in here and say it. It may just not come out of this. But yeah, I do not see anywhere in here to indicate the fees. It may be pulled from a payment or a charge, but maybe just not this. Okay. So let's see if there's anything else that came from that. So that one ran through none of them. Invoice payment succeeded. Okay. Let's see what that one says. So that one in the object, we have 5,000. It's really $50. Nowhere in here does it say anything about fees in this one either. Discounts. Nothing about fees. So it looks like we're kind of SOL on this one. We'd have to pull in fees a little bit different of a way. This is fine though. This should work. So now we have invoice finalized, sent, created, and paid. And all of these should add to our Airtable. So the last thing I'm going to do is turn this on. And now this should run. So now what I'm going to do is jump back into Airtable, and we will go do this from start to finish hopefully without doing anything here in make. So I'm going to pause it. I'm going to go write the invoice and pay it. All right, so I just saved the invoice. I'm going to review it and send it. Now we're going to go into Airtable. Okay, so we can see that updated everything pretty fast. Came in as a draft, updated from draft to sent. Now I'm going to go into my email and pay it real fast. Okay, so I just paid it. And now, okay, sweet. We can see it just updated it as paid. We can see all of this happened super fast. The invoice total is off by a magnitude of 100. So we'll just factor that in our formulas. But this should work great. So it says sent, updated to paid. This is awesome. It was a $10 invoice this time, so it says 1,000. So this is perfect. I think this is good to go. I am going to update some formulas in here. So how I would take this into account is I would say for profit, instead of this saying 1,000 and 5,000, we're going to include something in here that says checkbox. Actually, no, we can just use this field. So this field is filled in if it came from my old CRM. If it's not from the old CRM, then this is going to be all skewed. So what I'm going to say is if status paid, so let's edit this one. We're going to say if that field over there, if that field is filled in, that's going to return true. So if that field is filled in, I want to pull in that same formula. And if it's not filled in, then that's going to be the new way. And it's going to say invoice total divided by 100 and the fees, which currently are not anything. So that fixes this. Now let's update this to be a draft. I need to do the same thing here. It's on this one. This is our formula, so I'm going to copy this in here. And here, it's going to be just like that. I'm going to replace all this so if that record ID field is filled in, it's going to return the first way of doing it, which we can see like this. If it's not filled in, then we'll divide it by 100 and we'll delete this old formula. Sweet. So now let's click save there, and that appears to work correctly. So the only things that won't look right are these things down here at the end, which is totally fine with me. All right, so that's everything on how to integrate this with the CRM. The next thing that I'm going to do is do a video on comparing the total amount of hours paid versus total amount of hours used, and how you can come up with that calculation for every company that you work with based on invoices that look just like these. So click here in the end screen, right here in the middle of the screen, if you want to go watch that video on how to build out that reporting system.